Welcome to Life of Legacy, your key to a better life. I'm your host, Jonathan Lawrence Clark, and today I'm here with William Thomas Holt, Director of Franchise Operations for Spherion, a pioneer in the staffing and recruiting industry. Thomas Thomas has over 30 years of experience in the industry. He's an operations and efficiency expert and an innovator. Background includes sales, recruiting, training, account management, performance management and optimization, customer service, product development and production, and I'm sure a lot more than that on top of that, Thomas. He's participated in numerous tech upgrades and implementations. He's also a Miami Dolphins field entertainment, works with the Miami Dolphins field and entertainment team for over 20 years. He's a father of four children, enjoys the sports, arts, travels, loves to travel, and spends time with his family. He's an author of Paw Paw Tales book series, teaching children character lessons for their development and education. Thomas, welcome to Life of Legacy today.
Man, thank you so much for having me, Jonathan. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on the show.
So, did I leave anything out? That was quite a list there. I tried to make sure I included everything in there.
Yeah, I was like, who is he talking about? Is that me? I do all that. But yeah, no, the only thing I think is interesting is you mentioned I have four kids. I always say that I have four kids, buy two, get two free. Because my wife, my wife came with two, I came with two. So last first, I guess 14 years of our marriage was a blended family, which is awesome, right? It has its learnings and it has its value moments, and that's something that I am really happy that I got to experience because I learned a lot. So I call out, they're all my kids. That's all, I say I have four kids, but I just like to clarify that two of them I got and I didn't have to go through the creation part for. I
Yeah,
guess.
that's a great addition, right? We have a blended family as well, Thomas, so we
Uh-huh.
have that in common. So, yeah, a beautiful experience, definitely a unique experience,
Hmm.
with some challenges and things and blessings that don't come with the traditional family structure. So, I
True.
can definitely relate to that experience. So, thank you for sharing that with us too.
Absolutely, man. Good stuff.
Good stuff, good stuff. So our topic today is success secrets, and I know you have plenty of things you can share along those lines, with an emphasis on the importance of strong values and character. And we'll tie that into what I mentioned earlier about you being an author of the Paw Paw Tales, because that ties closely with that vision for what you've created in that book series. So
For
I'd
sure.
like to circle back to that eventually. First, what I like to do is talk about success and set the table for what we mean in our conversation today when we're talking about success, because success means different things to different people, right?
Mm.
So, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions today, and we're going to have a lot of discussion about success and what it means to be successful and how character and values tie into that.
Mhm.
But what would you say is your definition of success?
That's a great question. And the reason is I look at success differently than a lot of people. A lot of people define success as what you have, your level of income, wealth, your possessions, your social base, things of that nature. My definition of success, and I mention this a lot with my children's book series as well. It comes from my grandfather's statement to me when I was young. He says, success is defined in who you become, not in what you become.
Okay.
So success is not to me a culmination of collected things. It is who you are at your core, who you are when nobody's watching, the type of person and the type of contributor you are to your community and the world around you.
Okay. That's a very rich definition compared to what we often see in the media and on television and the things that perpetuated out there. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the images our kids see in terms of what success means is quite different from what you just described. And I can already hear where what you described already kind of leans into the character and values aspect when we're talking about success. So I'd love to hear more about that in just a little bit. But along the lines of what you just said, right? So based on your definition, do you consider yourself to be successful?
I think that's a yes and a no, right? I don't think success is a thing you achieve. I think it's a thing you constantly work toward your whole life.
Okay.
Um, so have I been successful in a lot of endeavors? Yes. Have I been successful in raising four successful kids who are doing well and have steered clear of a lot of trouble? Yes. Do I have a healthy marriage? And do I constantly endeavor to be a good husband? Yes. Have I finished the race? No, but not by a long shot. Have I done all that I wanted to do to impact the lives of young kids and help build characters and give them life skills so that all of us can have a better future? No, haven't done that yet. Haven't finished that yet. So I think there's some areas that I do feel successful. And believe it or not, it's not in the place that I live or the car that I drive. It's interesting to me. Some of the most successful people, the most wealthy people, if you meet them and sit and talk with them, they don't show their wealth. They don't wear their wealth. They don't drive their wealth. Their wealth is, that conversation, that 30 minutes with them. You understand then the value of their time and their knowledge, right? So there are a lot of places that I feel that I've been successful. I have multiple published titles, things of that nature, but I think that I constantly learn how to be a better person, right? I think my wife helps me with that a bit because she's able to see into me that nobody else sees, and she weighs in on it from time to time. So I'm constantly learning. I learn from my kids. With my daughter, my oldest daughter, we last time we had a conversation, I learned something again. Sometimes, I've learned before that sometimes when I talk to her, she doesn't need a solution. She just needs an ear, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to be reminded of that because I want to fix it. So, you know, there are places that, like I said, I feel successful, and there are some places that I'm like, I got a lot to learn. So hope that
Yeah.
answered your question.
No, you did. You did. Actually, you bring up something I might want to talk about that a little more, right? Because you're saying in some areas I feel like I have been successful, in other areas I have a ways to go and I have some improvement and some things I can still do, right?
Mhm.
So if we're talking to kind of a lot of the topics that we cover are beneficial to people who are early career, not just early career people all along the spans of their career, but even people who are kind of coming up to kind of get this wisdom and knowledge passed down to them. They can learn some things earlier without having to actually go through it and beat their head against the wall to figure it out, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of what we're doing. So you talked about, hey, yeah, some areas, yes, in other areas, probably not.
Mhm.
How do we, how do the youth, the people coming up, balance a healthy sense of self and confidence with also realizing that there's areas for them to grow and areas for them to improve? How do you balance it without falling on any extreme in terms of either being arrogant or being having low self-esteem and not really believing in yourself? How do
Mhm.
you have a healthy balance of understanding it's okay to have areas of growth, but you can
Mhm.
also have that level of self-confidence that you need to be effective?
Yeah, man, that's a great question, and I think that I kind of started out. Um, you talked about the extremes. And one of the things that I learned from my grandfather is any attribute taken to the extreme becomes a weakness, right?
Mm,
So if you're a really smart person, you take that to the extreme and you're arrogant, right? There's a huge difference between confidence and arrogance as well, right? So that's one of the things that I kind of try to hold in the back of my mind. Confidence is knowing for you that you know what you know and you've done the work, whatever that work may be, to be in the place that you are. That's confidence. and the ability to prove that I have done the work to be here. Arrogance is for everybody else. Arrogance is needing everyone else to know where you are, needing everyone else to know what you think you know. And there's a big difference. So for me, I try to stay grounded in the fact that I've done the work and I know why I'm where I am and that I'm good at what I do.
Hmm.
Um, and the second half of that though is understanding that nobody's perfect and that if you got to learn every day, you got to learn something new every day. That's kind of that's one of my drivers. And I don't I don't pigeonhole where I learn from, right? On my job, I learn things. I mean, there's tons of things to learn on my job, but it's more people, and understanding. Like I said, my definition of success is not found in my just in my professional life. It's really who I am. So I think the greater learning is learning things from different cultures and learning things from different people. Look, man, I've learned. I've been a speaker at an event before and learned something from the janitor that same day. So it's I would encourage everybody to understand that you perfection is perfection is something that we tend to strive for, but we also create um, we also create what it looks like because there's only one bar of perfection. And I'm going to just tell you now, I'm a Christian, so God's the only bar of perfection to me, and I'm never going to make that. I'm never going to
Yeah.
make that. But I can constantly try, and I can
Yeah.
constantly reach, but understand that I'm a human being,
Yeah.
and there's always going to be someone better than me. There's always going to be people that I'm better than, but that's not the defining factor. The defining factor is that I continue to strive to be better, and I continue to learn, and I continue to take what I have learned and put it into action, which then gives me the power to help others and to teach others and to bring up others and try to make people around me better. So, don't get caught up in, if I was talking to a young professional in front of me, I'd say, listen, get be impressed by um, your work. Be impressed by not necessarily quick successes, but the ability to learn through your failures, the ability to be steadfast when the boat gets rocky, right? The
Mhm.
ability to help someone else and see someone else succeed in what they're trying to do. All those things are going to help you succeed. It's going to make you a better who you are, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hear loud and clear what you're saying too. And it sounds like your focus is more so on striving for excellence, impact on others versus perfection. And that kind of keeps you balanced, right?
Mhm.
Without being on the either end of the extreme that we just
Mhm.
talked about, right?
Yeah, real quick anecdotal side. I'm around a lot of with especially with the Dolphins. I've interacted with a lot of celebrities, right? And there are some that, you know, they have achieved a lot in life, right? Especially in their field, and especially the way the world looks at them. And there are some that when I look at them and in my interaction with them, you know, I was impressed because the who they are is greater than the what they are. An
Mm.
example of that's Denzel Washington, right? He was just a phenomenal human being. Just to be around in that time that I was around him and our interaction was was just phenomenal. There are some others that I'm like, I'll never watch another one of your shows. I'll
Wow.
never go to another just because the who you are around, when we were there in that moment, in that interaction, and it wasn't even directly at me, it was
Mhm.
how I see you treat other people.
Right.
Your success is, um, your success needs to be grounded in something more than, than the physical things and the accolades that people give you. And that's disheartening, right?
Yeah.
So it really is, people need to restructure what they what they define, how they define success. And if we did, we'd have a lot more of the success that you see and that people see now. The things that come with it,
Yeah.
if they redefine what success is and started it in a core area, we'd see a lot more success.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And just hearing about your experiences with the Dolphins as well, it makes me think about, our youth who are putting people on a pedestal
Mm-hmm.
because of their stature or status in a certain industry, whether it's, obviously sports and entertainment is big. So those are the areas where people get a lot of shine and a lot of media publicity and are out there visible a lot. And so our kids see a lot of that and they think, okay, that's what it means to be successful. And then see people's behavior who are in those areas, right, in those arenas, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes start to emulate those kind of behaviors because they associate that person with being successful in the bar. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think if I wish more people understood the level of responsibility that comes with that level of notoriety,
That's right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big responsibility and a big opportunity to make an impact. And I think there's a lot of people that aren't intentional about how they leverage those platforms, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah.
Very well said.
So back to you. I wanted to learn a little bit about you and your experiences and how that's kind of played into your success because, we started out with your intro and you've done quite a bit. So you mentioned your family a bit, and I know you're going to talk about being part of a blended family some. What have you learned anything from being a parent, being a spouse that has translated into making you more effective as a professional? Is there anything that you can take away from that that makes you better in the professional world as well?
Yeah, I mean that's that when you try to learn something new every day, like, it becomes a long list, my brother, a long list. You know, some of the things that just pop off top of mind is understanding you got two ears and one mouth. And I think that crosses over in the business world. Just listening to understand and active listening. That's another thing you learn with families that you take into the professional world. For instance, if I'm talking to one of my kids or to my wife and I'm distracted with other things, it it can um, indicate to them that their value is a lot less than whatever it is that I'm distracted with,
Hmm.
right? My wife will tell me that real quick. I'll let you finish on your phone so that you can spend some time with me, right? And it's the same thing. If you're in a business meeting or you're trying to work with a client or something like that, and you're distracted with everything else around the room, they're not an audience of one.
Yeah,
So things like that crossover. Patience is another one. Things are not going to always go your way. My grandfather used to tell me all the time, and I'm gonna warn you, bro. I'm going to talk about my grandfather a lot. He was probably one of the most influential people in my life. So a lot of things that I say, I hear, and I just remember from his wisdom.
I love
Um,
it.
and he was a very grounded, man with his faith, and it was life changing for me. And that's not a figure of speech. That's fact, right?
Hmm.
But one of the things that when you're talking about patience, one of the things that he'd always remind me is that um, you need patience. People have to be patient with you,
Yeah,
so you need to learn to be patient with people. Um, that's one of the things and he used to help me a lot with just people in the workplace. Here's one that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but I think is important. And I used to write a blog called Grandpa's Wisdom, and this was um, one of the blogs. It was watch out for snakes. So I'm a storyteller, man. So I'm gonna tell you a little story, right?
no,
So
go ahead.
so I used to work with my grandfather when I was really young, from like 8 to 16. Right, he passed away when I was 16, and we're doing some landscaping one day, and we're working in his yard, and I'm talking to him about problems and stuff like that. A little young, I was probably 11 or 12 at this point.
Hmm.
And I saw this snake over there, and I go grab him, tool and I'm going to go kill this snake. He said, hey, 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 what are you doing? And I said, man, I'm going to kill this snake. He said, what's that snake doing to you? I said, none, but it's a snake. And he said something, and this is how my grandfather was, man. He was so, it's the ability to say a lot with a little. He said, you can't go killing every snake you see.
Hmm.
He says, there's always a snake in the grass. You just need to know where it is. And I was like, man, and what he's saying is, yeah, you interact with people. There's always going to be people who have characteristics that you just need to be aware of. You can't go attacking all of them, or you'll be on a never-ending quest that really ends up tearing at your soul. But just know where they are and know what they do and know how to react and respond around them or what to and not to say around them. Know who has the ability to earn trust and those who's broken other folks' trust. So, you know, you learn from that, right?
Yeah.
Knowledge is what you gain from going through something. Wisdom is the ability to learn from other people's mistakes. So when you are going through scenarios and you see how people respond and treat other people, I tell my daughters all the time, when you dating somebody, you don't know that person until you see them angry, until you see them mad.
Mm.
And it's not mad at necessarily at you, it's mad at whatever they're mad at, because how they respond to other people, that's how they gonna respond to you when they're mad at you,
Mm.
right? So that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And those are things that you learn, when you're dealing with family or when you're dealing with kids or, or you're dealing with your spouse. And you can carry those things over in business world. I mean, there's a plethora, my friend, but those are some that just come to top of mind. And yeah, there's the topical ones, right? Being a better communicator, right? For instance, understanding the gravity of trust, right?
Hmm.
Um, Being able to respect other people and other people's ideas, being able to agree to disagree. That's hard because everybody wants to be right.
Hmm.
But you're
Yeah.
not always right because right and facts and right are two different things in a lot of people's heads. So sometimes you just have to agree to disagree because we wouldn't want the world to all be the same. Everybody's like, oh, I want the world to be a melting pot. Oh, I want the world to be a melting pot. And I'm like, I don't. I don't. You put 10 cheeses in a pot and you melt it, and that cheese ends up looking like the same. It's just one big bowl of cheese. I'd rather the world be a tossed salad, right? See, a tossed salad, everybody lives in that same bowl, but the grapes are still the grapes. The lettuce is still the lettuce. The tomato is still a tomato. And you have all this individuality, but everybody blends together to make a wonderful meal. To me, you know, that's much better than a melting pot. So understanding people's differences and respecting, even if you disagree, respecting their perspective, and learning to live with that.
Yeah. I love that. I love that tossed salad. I've never heard that before. That's a good one. I'm stealing it too. I'm gonna use it
You can liberate it, my friend. You can liberate
again. I'm gonna use that again. But yeah, no, man, you said a lot, and I've been kind of taking notes here because the great thing about having this podcast is I get to learn from every guest I have. So I'm loving that. But I heard a lot of things that you carried over from learning about from being a parent, being a spouse, that you've taken from life and you've translated into the business world. You talked about the power of being present and how important it is to be able to be locked in and give somebody your full attention and not be distracted. You talked about patience, which I think we can all agree that that's an important thing to have, no matter where you are, is to have some patience, which is tough in this world, this microwave society.
hmm
Patience is becoming a little bit scarce nowadays. So I think that's something that we have to be more intentional about teaching and practicing, right? Can't kill every snake. It was the first time I heard that one, but that was a good one. You just need to know where they are. You don't necessarily have to chase everyone down and take care of it, right? Just be aware. Communication, trust, respect for other people's ideas. And then of course, can't forget the tossed salad versus the melting pot. How important it is to have diversity and people just kind of working together and being in harmony. So, um, that was a long list. That was more than I expected out to get out of that question. So I appreciate that. I think that's something we can all take and use and be better people for it.
For sure.
So along the same tangent, right, where we're talking about your lessons that you've translated into professional success, in terms of your interactions with your kids, do you talk to your kids about these topics about success? And if so, what kind of conversations do you have with your kids when you're talking about it?
Oh man, yeah. We have various conversations. I'm fortunate that my kids reach out to me with questions, especially on the business side. I just had a conversation with my daughter 2 days ago. She changed jobs, and she has aspirations of doing other things than working. And I told her, I said, listen, you know, the difference between a job and a career, a job you do to pay your bills, and a career is something you do all day long, even if nobody paid you.
Hmm.
So, I told her that if you want to focus on, something different, but you don't know if that's going to be enough to sustain you, then get a stable job. Get something that you can do and have great benefit from. And then once you stabilize that and you're good, you're above average at what you're doing on your job, then you can start focusing on that thing that you're trying to accomplish. This particular daughter has a business that she cares for people's pets, especially when they're busy professionals, right?
Hmm.
But her job at that time was a struggle, and so she's recently gotten hired on for the state where she works, which has a lot of consistency. And now she can work on building this other business until your passion becomes your job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's things like that. It's financial security. When I was coming up, I was raised by a single mom, raised six of us, and we were poor. I mean, not poor. We couldn't afford the OR at the end. We were just poor, and my mom did the best that she could, but she didn't understand investment. She didn't understand savings. She didn't understand, what a 401k or IRA is, or Roth IRA, or, she didn't understand, the stock market and things like that. And as I've learned and tried to educate myself on the pluses and minuses of credit cards, right? I ain't paying
Mhm.
nobody's interest. Understanding how taxes work and understanding how a business works, right? I'm sharing that information, with our kids. My wife and I take different financial trainings. Dave Ramsey is one of them that we've taken, and we've provided that to our kids. So, my daughter in her new job, and my son's in the Air Force.
Hmm.
Um, he's doing well. He's actually there in Georgia, and he's investing, and they're all doing things that we were not. We didn't have. We just have the education to do when we were younger. I
Yeah.
didn't learn that stuff till I was in my 30s. So giving them the opportunity and the knowledge um, at a much younger age will hopefully set them up to be in a better position than even I am now. And it seems like it's working. Listen, my daughter bought a house before I did.
That's, that's what that's what we try to do though, right?
Yeah,
Try to
yeah.
get them in a position to do things better than we did, right?
Mhm. But you know what? Here's, I think, something important. Um, I consider myself blessed, right? But even when my kids were younger, I understood the value of work and investment. So there were a lot of things that my kids wanted, and I'm like, well, how are you gonna come up with your end of the money? And I think a lot of parents nowadays just give it to them. Oh, I
Hmm.
didn't have this. Let me give this to them. And um, I think that can be a disadvantage, because then they don't have any investment. They don't have any sweat equity
Yeah.
in that thing. So as much as I try to give them knowledge, and there are things that, we're setting up for them and that sort of thing, I want to give them the understanding that everything is a product of work. It's a product of work. Anything that you really are going to value is a product of work. And, I try to, like my grandfather, orchestrate scenarios and show them that more than telling them that. And it's paid off, right? It's paid off.
Yeah.
And the way that they're living, the way that they're doing um, the things that are important to them. And that to me makes me feel a little better, you know?
Yeah. 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 I love that. And two, you touched on something that I think is extremely valuable and important because I noticed that the generations that are kind of entering the workforce, the young professionals, let's call them that,
Mhm.
um, come in with different expectations probably than our generation came in with
Mhm.
into the workforce. And I think there's more of an expectation of having some fulfillment and
Mhm.
joy and that kind of thing out of work versus it being something that's just practical to provide,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Great. And I think a lot of us as parents have worked to create an opportunity for our kids to be able to align themselves with what they're passionate about and good at doing earlier
Mhm.
versus stumbling and figuring it out late in life, right?
Yeah.
How do you, and I heard you, the advice that you gave your daughter, how do we kind of frame that up and package that in terms of when we're talking to those young professionals? How do you pursue and align your profession with your passion, your gifts, right? What are some steps that people can take to do that sooner? It, as a life coach, I'm running into, for example, I'll meet people mid-career that are still trying to figure that out.
Mhm.
They started just trying to make a living, trying to make a check, and 15, 20 years later, they're in a profession that they really don't care for, that probably they're not ideally aligned with. They picked up skills along the way and they're making it, but they'd really rather do something else. And then as a career and life coach, they come to me and they're like, how do I do this? Like, I know I don't want to do this. I don't really even know what other options I have. How do I make a transition this late in life? I have responsibilities, and they're trying to figure out how they can pivot when they've spent 15, 20 years building a skill set that they really don't want to pursue anymore. Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that in terms of how you can align yourself
Yeah.
earlier?
That's a lot to unpack. And I'm going to try to be concise with my thoughts. I think the first thing is that people need to understand that you're never stuck. You can be stuck in your mind, but you're not stuck. You have options. You might not like them all,
Hmm.
but you always have options. You always have a choice. So that's the first thing I think that people should understand. Secondly, when it comes to the younger workforce, they have so much more available to them than many people did. Traditional workers versus the emergent workforce, the different generations. When I was a kid, I'm gonna date myself, but I remember when the internet came around. I remember when the first cell phone was introduced. There was no YouTube, and right now YouTube is my favorite professor. So you can learn to do anything you want. You really can. Um, the question is, are you going to put that into action, right? And if you were in a room full of 100 people and you said to those 100 professionals, let's say you were in a room of 100 professionals, and you said, "Hey, how many of you are working in the field of your degree or of the education you had coming out of grade school, elementary, high school, whatever?" There's going to be a very low percentage of people that raise their hand because a lot of times your degree chooses you, right? I went when I was in UNCG, I took business because I figured everything has to have an element of business to it. Even if you are an athlete or whatever, you need to understand how the business world works. But, and that's something I've talked to my kids about when they were struggling. What do I want to do? What do I want to do? Well, if you don't have a specific goal of who you want to be, take something that's general enough that you can do anything, right?
Hmm.
But and these aren't my three. I forgot the guy's name, slipped my mind, but there were three questions that I encourage my kids to ask when they're just trying to figure out what they want to do. And this could be if you're at the beginning of your career, midway through your career, or if you're at the end of your what you consider to be your working career, and you're just trying to find out what the next step is.
All right,
Here's,
go slow. I'm writing these down.
all right. Here are three questions to ask yourself to help understand what you want to do in your life. One, what is something that comes easier to you and harder to other people? What is something that you can do pretty easy? Like, yeah, it's nothing to me, but you see other people struggling to do that, right? The second question is, what would you do all day if nobody paid you? Even if nobody paid you, what would you be fine doing all day long? And then the third thing is, what is it something that you can do to give back? Give back to your community, give back to the people in your circle of influence, right? Is there a way that you can get back to, impact the betterment of the world, right? If you can answer those three questions, you'll narrow yourself down to what it is that you're really passionate about.
Got it. So, what's easier for you? What
Mhm.
comes easy to you but harder to others
Yeah,
generally?
that's your skill set or your talent.
Okay. Second, what would you do if nobody paid you? What would you be willing to do all day if nobody paid you?
That's your passion.
That's your passion. All right. And then the third one, repeat that one for me one more time. Number three.
Third one is how can you give back?
How can you give
What
back?
can you do to give
What can
back?
you do to serve others?
Right. And that's your service. Exactly right.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
love, I always say love is defined in putting the thing you love or the person you love in front of yourself. And when you serve other people, that's that's a form of that's an expression of love,
Yeah.
it's agape, right? But it's putting other people in front of yourself, trying to help somebody else, even if you don't really get a benefit out of it. But
Yeah.
I think that's a huge element. And it's one of the things that it concerns me today that I see more people focused on their benefit and what they can get out of things versus how they can contribute and what they can do.
That
You
is
know,
a big one.
yeah.
That is a big one. Yeah. There's a lot of focus on getting that return. And
Hmm.
I think too, that also causes some people to give up sooner than they
Hmm.
would have if they don't get the return fast enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's an old saying that says your breakthrough is a step away from where you quit. And
Yes,
a
absolutely.
lot of people quit way too quickly. And they have no perseverance. I think that's why, we have high divorce rates and all kinds of stuff. It's just because people have gone away from um, the ability to hang in there, you know,
Yeah.
because it's not like you said, microwave society. I might liberate that from you, right? So, we do have a microwave society. Everybody wants instant gratification, and
Yeah.
in some cases, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but in a lot of cases, it's not. It's just not. It's not realistic, and it's not what you need. It's what you want. It's not what you need.
That's what you need. Okay. And some of our audience too, because I know I aimed that at the early professional. Some of our audience too is in that stage where they're looking for more, been working
Hmm.
for a while, mid-career, ready for something different. If you came up with three here that are great for finding out kind of what your niche might be.
Hmm.
Uh, if you had somebody that was mid-career that wanted to pivot,
Hmm.
wanted to do something different, and they're trying to figure out where do I start? Where
Hmm.
do I go about making this transition? What would be your thoughts on that and how they could do it?
Um, I think the first thing that I would encourage them to do is understand where they are, right? What are your commitments? What are your responsibilities? Because you don't want to jeopardize your current responsibilities. There's an element of faith to everything. Don't
Yeah,
get me wrong. You will not move forward without taking a risk. There's an old saying, a turtle never moves forward until he sticks his head out, right? So there's an element of risk in everything, but understand um, where you are and what you need to keep the status quo,
yeah,
right? I think the next thing is answering those three questions. Like I said, those three questions are for anybody. But once you answer those questions and you have an idea of what you want to do, give yourself time to learn, right? Don't just jump ship. Um, unless you're in a serious, stage of detriment, whether it's physical or emotional, or there's no passion. If you're doing a mundane job, that's fine. Do that mundane job while you learn how to do what your passion is, what your next step is.
Yeah.
Understand how that thing works, right? And I say this to young folks all the time, and it's relevant for people who are um, midlife as well, is that you got to understand the game you're going to.
Yeah.
Right? Michael Jordan wasn't the best because he came in and said, "Man, I'm going to start shooting 5 pointers in my cleats and my football helmet while I'm wielding my bat." He came in and understood the game of basketball,
Yeah.
and then he started making it better. You see, so understand where you are, learn as much about where you're going, because that also helps. I think that also helps reduce your fear. My newest children's book is called Fear Fighters. And it was the concept that my grandfather taught me, that when you fear something, there's two types of fear. There's a fear of terror, and there's a fear of respect. The difference between those two is knowledge. So if you learn as much as you can about what you fear, it goes from being the fear of terror because you don't understand it. And that you can take that across the world to whatever fear a lot of people have, is they don't understand it.
Yeah.
When you understand it, it's not that you just go gung ho and do it, but you respect it. You understand how to keep yourself safe around that thing, whatever it may be, whether
Yeah.
it, you know. So that's why I say you got to learn where you're going. Step
Yeah.
into the game with some knowledge. You're going to learn. You should learn every day, but step into that thing with some knowledge. Understand what it takes to get in it and what it takes to grow in it, and then have a goal of where you're trying to get to. So now you have a plan and a path, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the last thing is learn to celebrate, right? Everybody, a lot of people, I can't say everybody, a lot of people forget to celebrate the little milestones. We're always our greatest critics. I say that all the time. I am my own greatest critic, but I need to constantly remember I should be my biggest fan too.
Mm.
So don't spend so much time, getting on yourself for not being where you think you should be or not knowing something. And remember to celebrate, yo, I got here.
Yeah.
I made it to this step. I got that thing accomplished because, when you're accomplishing things and you're putting the knowledge you've learned into action and you're getting things done, you know, you've got to keep that momentum rolling. You got to
Yeah.
keep the momentum rolling. You got to give yourself a break. You talked
Yeah.
about perfectionism early on in the call, and it's like, sometimes when it comes to, especially like writing, you got to get it out there. It's never going to be perfect.
Hmm.
And that's the other piece of it. I mentioned this earlier too, the ability to learn from failures.
Yeah.
Failing is not necessarily failing. It's win or learn, right? Failure is when you stop trying. That's what failure is.
Yeah.
But when you learn the hard way, you know, you might do it 99 times, but that one success is going to be, worth all that learning. So that's why, I say try to learn first, and it can reduce the amount of times that you fail as you're moving on, because you're going to fail. You don't know everything.
Yeah.
But remember, when you're learning, count it as a learning. Say, man, I learned something that time, instead
Yeah.
of I messed up. You got to learn to celebrate. Hopefully those things are helpful.
Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely. Very powerful. And as I think about it too, in terms of, when I'm trying to help somebody through that process of transition, using what you just said is extremely important, because celebrating the wins, right, and acknowledging what you've achieved, it gives you some perspective number one, but it's tied to finding transferable skills in what you've done so far that might actually help you be successful in what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
And that kind of goes in hand with when you said understand where you are, right? So understand where you are now. That includes what you're capable of and the skills that you've built, right?
Mhm.
Understand where you're going because you talked about that. That helps with the fear factor. If
Mhm.
you learn a little bit about what's your target, what does it take to get there? What does it take to sustain and be successful in it? It
Mhm.
also might give you a reality check because sometimes we think we want something,
Facts.
but when we find out what it really entails, we're like, you know what? I think I'm good on that. I think
Yeah. Yeah,
I
no,
think
that's
something
true.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man, that's true. And I think it's a biblical proverb that talks about what person starts to build a house and doesn't count the cost, or goes into war and doesn't count the cost, you know.
yeah,
And you're right, man. A lot of people's fear and trepidation is, man, what if I get there and I don't like it? Well, if you learn about what it is before you get there, you
yeah,
can get a really good sense of it. And then you're talking to people who are already there. All that stuff helps you learn where to get knowledge from,
yes,
right? And then when you find people that have been through it, wisdom kicks in.
yeah.
Because let me give you a perfect example. Um, when I was going to buy a new car, I finally got into a position where I could have bought any car I wanted,
Mhm.
within reason. I'm not going to buy some $500,000 car, but I had my heart set on BMW. That's what
Okay.
I wanted, right? I wanted a BMW X5 or X7, and you know, I talked to countless BMW owners, and they all told me the same thing. They all told me the same thing.
What I say?
They said, "Look, bro, it's the best driving machine on the planet, hands down. That the average person can get their hands on, best driving machine on the planet. But if you are a person that holds your cars, and I am, when I buy a car, that car, my last car, I kept for 20 years.
Same way. I'm the same way.
Yeah, but he said after 60,000 miles, you better have a good relationship with your mechanic." And listen, this is what BMW owners told me. And there was so much consistency in it that I said, you know what? I decided to get something else. And that's not a knock on BMW, you know what I'm saying? But that is just an example of where before you make a leap, before you make a jump, understand where you are. I knew I could buy whatever I wanted, I could afford whatever I wanted.
Mhm.
Understand where you're going, right? I did my research on BMWs. But I talked to people who were already in the game, and I'm talking about these folks are
Amen.
still BMW lovers. They still drive BMWs because that's what they've decided. That's what they want, right? But they all told me the same thing,
Yeah.
and I learned from their learning, and that to me, I celebrated a little bit. Was like, hey, fam, you used a little bit of wisdom right there
Yeah.
because you don't want that problem. You don't want those problems. I'm not a lease person. If you want a lease, if you're a lease type person, BMW is perfect. You're gonna love it. You get the newest next one every time, and you're just gonna be good, right? You'll never hit 60,000 miles. But that's not who I am.
Yeah.
So I was able to learn that. And then I had to celebrate, not the fact that, man, dang, I'm not gonna be able to get that car that I wanted. It's, dude, you learned something. You
Yeah.
were able to make a good decision and not have buyer's remorse because it just didn't align with the type of person that you are.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an example of that.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people skip that step of gathering that information and really finding out what they need to do
Hmm.
because probably kills the buzz a
Hmm.
little bit, right? Because you got this idea of what it is, but then once you get to the reality, you're like, okay, this is going to be a lot of work,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So you get in there and you probably a little reluctant to explore the reality versus the fantasy and the dream, right?
yeah. That's
And
true.
and then something you mentioned earlier, if you're emotionally in a pretty bad state with your current profession or career, and you're looking for any opportunity to jump, how can I end this misery and this pain, right? And you're liable to kind of grab onto anything.
Mhm.
So I think one thing I've talked about with people is, you gave the three tips for how to figure out what you want to do and what your passion might be. You can actually start to serve. That was your number three. How can I serve others? You can start to volunteer doing
Perfect.
doing some of the stuff that you think you might want to do.
Perfect.
It gives you some
Perfect.
experience,
Hmm.
that you touch it a little bit. You can see how
Yep.
you feel about it. You can learn a little bit. You get
Get
some
behind the curtain. Yep.
behind the curtain. You pick up some skills, maybe, right?
Hmm.
There's no money tied to it, so there's no obligation because you don't have to use to pay your mortgage, right?
That's right. Hmm.
So that's somewhere you can start is just serve. Is there a way you can serve and do the work and really get some experience and see if you like it?
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. You know, something came to my mind, and I'm gonna just say it because I've learned say it. I don't know who it helps. And this was one of my blogs too when I was doing my blog years ago. My grandfather used to always say, "Never fall in love," and I was like, "Come on, Grandpa, you can't be that cynical, dude. You know, you don't never fall in love. What are you talking about?" And he explained it to me. He said, "Look," he said, "Have you ever fallen?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "How'd that feel?" And I was like, "Dang, wait a minute." Because when I fell, I was terrified. It was uncertainty. How hard am I going to hit? You know, am I going to break something? Am I going to hurt something?
Mhm.
And he said, I don't, when it comes to love, I never want you to fall in love. I never want something to happen that dynamic that puts that much fear and stress on you. He said, what I want you to do is walk in love. Because when you walk in love, you take step by step. You look at where you're going. You make sure you're taking the right path. He said, when you walk in love, it's a deliberate action that you're taking, and there's a level of confidence when you're getting to that goal because you're doing it methodically and you're doing it, you're doing it with passion and all those things. But he said the difference between falling into something and walking into something, he said there's a tremendous difference. And that's why I tell you never to fall in love. So when people are looking to change their careers, that's another thing that you could say is, hey, don't fall into something, walk into something.
Yeah, that's gonna be my next hit song. I guess that would be my first hit song because I don't have a hit song right now. Don't fall in love, walk in love.
Yeah.
That's a good one, man. This is you had so many gems so far. I'm gonna call this the William Thomas Holt Masterclass episode of Life of Legacy, man. This has been great so far. All right, so before we're gonna talk next about values and character and how that influences success.
Mhm.
So that'll be our next segment. But before we both out of that, you've given a lot of gems already, but I want to ask for one more set, if you
Mhm.
don't mind, right? So what are your keys while we're talking about success before we transition? What are your top three keys to success?
If I put them in one word, learn, do, teach. Learn is really what we've been talking about. It's funny. I go into schools all the time, and I ask kids, "Have you ever heard knowledge is power? Raise your hand if you've heard knowledge is power." And they all raise their hands. They've heard knowledge is power, and I'd say I disagree with that, and it freaks the teachers every time. But I tell them I could have the knowledge to make a sandwich, and I could have the knowledge to drive a car. But if I don't ever put gas in a car and crank up the engine and put somebody in the car and drive it down the road, nobody goes anywhere. If I don't go get the ingredients to a sandwich and actually put them together and hand somebody a sandwich, nobody eats. So you have to have knowledge. But if you don't put it into action, which is number two, do, you have potential, but you don't have power, you know? And then
Yeah,
the last thing, like I said, is giving back and how can you help bring somebody else along,
yeah,
right? So yeah, to me, those would be keys to success, understanding that success is more than in my book, in my opinion. My definition of success is more than how much money's in my bank or how what I drive. You know, because there, in my opinion, there are people who are billionaires who have crawled and backstabbed and disenfranchised people to get there. And to me, that's hollow success. That's empty. And you can see some of those people do horrible things, right?
Yeah.
Whereas there are some people who may not, they might be a couple hundred thousand there or maybe a millionaire, but there's this legacy of people behind them that says, hey, I owe my success to that cat because they helped me do this and they helped me understand that. Oh man, I got this little gem from them that really changed. See, to me, they're successful.
Yeah.
They're successful because there's girth, there's um there's this density to their
Yeah.
success.
Absolutely.
So yeah, learn, do, and teach.
Learn, do, teach. Got all three of them. And that is the perfect segue as you start to talk about the true meaning of success and what you're willing to do for it, right? Perfect segue into talking about values and character and the impact those have on success. So I want to talk a little bit about that.